So last Monday, I ran my weekly D&D session on stream, and during which I suffered. I had a plan going in, but everything went completely wrong. Like 5 minutes into the session, I had to improvise everything on the spot. Everything I had was derailed, and I had to find a way to come back. What is up, YouTube? Today we're talking about derailment in D&D and how I came back from it. If this is the first time we're meeting, my name is Francis. I'm a relatively new dungeon master, and in this video, I'm going to be reviewing my own DMing, and hopefully you can learn from my experience and my failures. So to give a brief introduction of where the party was at, they spent a few sessions in an alternate dimension, and coming out of that alternate dimension, the entire world that they knew had changed. The time period has changed, the environment has changed, time itself has become timely wibbly wobbly, and they are trying to figure out what are they going to do now in this brand new-ish world that they developed. So my plan and expectations for this party and for the session were pretty simple. Find information around them. By the end of it, decide what to do with that information. So if they wanted to go do this or go do that, I can plan around it as a DM who writes from week to week. And to do this, I let the players talk. Usually this lasts from 10 to 15 minutes or probably 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the level of confusion they're at. By the end of this conversation, I give them something to work with, whether it's a few NPCs that they can ask questions, whether it's some information of who to talk to. This is pretty much the case when my party was traveling, following a river to the nearest town, and they've discovered a fisherman who was fishing along the river. When the party gets to the town, this is where things get pretty derailed, because I asked myself before the session, what would the players do? And here's what I had in mind. They would hang around for a few days, try to make some coins since they didn't have any, and get a grip on where they're at geographically and figure out how society works, because society has changed during this time skip. Just to give a little background information on that, this was before the party was teleported to the alternate dimension. So last campaign, they had a TBK by an exalted frost giant known as Gracchus the Subjugator. The party learned up front at the very beginning that Gracchus, the exalted frost giant, has destroyed the government and claimed the entire region for himself. And people are beginning to become adjusted to living under this barbaric leadership. In this post-war period, I figured that they would try to get a grip, some sort of grip on this society and how this works. So here's what actually happened. The party wanted to go to Amistad, and Amistad is another city way far away. Amistad is essentially the hometown of two of the main party members, and it's a completely different region, and it is a few weeks away by foot. The party immediately decided to do this and essentially tried to craft their own way of getting there, regardless of whether or not how prepared they are. So how did I come back from it? I said yes. I let it happen, and I said to myself, okay, let's see where it goes, because yes, you can go there, but it's very tough to get there. I gave myself permission to let the players affect the game in what they decide. And that was pretty much the remaining session, trying to craft their own method of getting to Amistad. So this is how I brought it back. The NPCs that I made that existed, I kind of gave them different roles depending on what was going on. And I gave the basic stats to NPCs, I gave the basic combat stats to NPCs that may or may not fight, using the Dungeon Master's Guide of Create a Monster tables. Overall, at the end of the session, they had a very fun time. It was impactful. There was a little bit of everything. There was some social encounters, there was discoveries, there was combat encounters, and there's even a makeshift quest line that they even developed for themselves. Now, here's a few lessons that I've learned from this, and that I want to make a note of for any dungeon masters out there, is to not be attached to a certain series of events. Let the player impact the game in their own way, whether they can craft something themselves, and give yourself permission. And this is something I still struggle with, is give myself more permission to be reactive. Give myself more permission to give the players more commission. Especially as a dungeon master, I think that as someone who spends the most time working on the campaign, even though I stream it, it's for them. And the way I do this is to focus on settings and not story. If I wanted to write a story, I would write like a novel or a book. I focus on the environment, focus on the encounters, focus on names and stats and NPCs and what they would do versus scripting everything that come up, especially now since there's not really a main villain that the party is interacting with. So that's about it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this. If you learned something from this, please let me know by hitting that like button down below. I stream D&D every single week. Consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.